Welcome back to a Boxscore Geeks show. We actually have a reserve in today, which will be one of our topics. Devin Dignam subbing in for Arturo Galletti to talk, among all things, the All-Star reserves. We're also going to talk about our LaMarcus Aldridge's Overrated piece, which could also be called Dre Recycles a Patrick piece. You had said this earlier in the season, Patrick, but we managed to get slammed by SB Nation. There's a post dedicated to just disagreeing with us. And then finally,
yeah, that's when you know you've hit the jackpot.
I definitely. And the final part is your brilliant piece on Shawn Marion's interesting word on labor practices. So we're going to hop right in to start. Devin, I'll let you lead us in. You've done this for a few years now. Nothing personal. I think you kind of just have a template that you copy and paste into at this point, talking about who the coaches selected to the All-Star reserve team.
Yeah, that's basically what I do. Because year after year, it's the same old story, unfortunately. And the story that it is that you've got all these productive players who miss out on the All-Star game because fans and coaches are obsessed with players who score a lot of points. And usually players who score a lot of points on teams that are winning, or in the case of the East this year, aren't losing too badly.
The Bobcats are in the playoffs. The Bobcats, 6 games under 500, are currently in the playoffs.
Yep. If you look at the standings, and this is another piece I did a bit earlier in the year, the Raptors, who are in third place right now in the East, would be tied with Phoenix for the 8th spot, at least last time I checked. And they're in third place with home court advantage in the East, and they would be barely making the playoffs in the West.
All right, so there were a few names. I'm going to call you out on one, and we have on certain pieces been doing more editing. Something slipped through the cracks on one of your pieces. You put Anthony Davis as a reserve for the West, and it turns out he was not selected. And the other player that you've been beating the drums really hard for is Lance Stevenson for the East. So these are two players that just you've definitely given a lot of credit to, and it seems odd that the coaches have no respect for them.
Yeah, so on the Anthony Davis thing, I put up a whole pile of tables on that piece, and I didn't want to, but I had no other way of getting the data across. But so I had 3 tables with Anthony Davis on them, and only in one table did I accidentally select him as an All-Star reserve. So,
well, to be fair, it's like we said before. I mean, it's a perfectly understandable mistake because when you're preparing it, you're like, "There's no way this guy's not going to be an All-Star, right?"
But even still,
we brought this up before. He's the first player since Hakeem Olajuwon in an injured season to average 20, 10, and 3 and not make the All-Star game.
And that's via Justin Kupatko, creator of Basketball Reference and consultant for the Blazers. So that should tell you something.
Yeah.
So, but I only made one tiny mistake, and actually I didn't even notice it until you mentioned that a commenter had pointed it out, and then I went, "Oh crap!" And I went on the article and fixed it. But yeah, Anthony Davis missing the All-Star game in the West is ridiculous, and Lance Stevenson, same thing. Lance Stevenson has been amazing, and as we've said a couple times recently, he's playing better than Paul George. Actually, for the Pacers, Paul George is getting the MVP buzz. Lance Stevenson doesn't even get selected for the All-Star game.
So, sorry, my cat's joining in on this. So I think it's interesting. I'd love to hear from some Pacers fans on this. At the beginning of the season, we said, take the unders on the Pacers. No way they're going to win 55 wins. And clearly, that didn't work out for us. But as I've said many times, on Boxscore Geeks, we are kind of more interested in the truth than we are in blasting out our opinions. So when the truth changes, or when the truth turns out to be something that we didn't see, we're generally the first ones on the bandwagon. It happened last year when, before the season, we said Andre Drummond would be a bust, and then 20, 30 games in, we're like, wait a minute, this guy is incredible. We didn't know this. And we looked at the numbers. We said we're wrong. We changed our mind. But it turns out nobody else was doing that. The people in Detroit were still like, oh, he needs to be brought along slowly. And we're like, no. He's the next Dwight Howard. Don't bring him on slowly. Give him lots of minutes. And it seems like a similar thing is happening with Lance Stevenson. Before the season, we were like, Lance Stevenson's pretty good, not great, but pretty good, and he's definitely better than Danny Granger, but Danny Granger's probably going to start and take all these minutes, so we think the Pacers probably not going to be quite as good as the euphoria justifies, and then it turns out Granger got injured, and Stevenson got a ton of minutes, and not only was Stevenson good and better than average, but Stevenson made a big leap, and now he's great, and we look at the data, and we say we were wrong, and this is why we're wrong. And we're out there, I think we're out there broadcasting louder than most Pacers fans saying, wait a minute, what about Lance Stevenson? What the hell? And I would love to know, when we say things like Lance Stevenson's better than Paul George, I think that's the kind of thing that certain mainstream news agencies pick that up and they say, that's just the Boxscore Geeks being their fucking crazy selves again. And I wonder if there are Pacers fans out there that are saying, yeah, damn right. Doesn't anybody notice how good Lance Stevenson is? I mean, I'd love to hear from them. See how they feel about it when we say stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Devin.
I was just going to say, I mean, Pacers fans aren't really any different from other fans. So Paul George still scores the points on that Pacers team. So most fans are going to think Paul George is the man on that team. And but
the point is that on the Pacers, like a Pacers fan is going to be the one likely to acknowledge the things that Stevenson does that aren't in the points column.
They'll say, see, that's the thing. I think they'll say, yeah, he's a great player and whatnot, but Paul George scores, it's like 24, 25 points a game, right? So it'll be Paul George scores these points. He's clearly the team's best player.
All right, I'm just going to say this before the entire fucking internet comes down on us. No one on this podcast is saying Paul George is a bad player. We all think Paul George is an all-star. It's just that we're saying Lance Stevenson is that good. That's the little things he do, which is always my biggest pet peeve. The little things that contribute to so much winning, and therefore they're actually big things, but they're not in the points column. Lance Stevenson is just amazing at all of those things, and the fact that he does it from the shooting guard position is truly remarkable. So honestly, it really pisses me off when I see things like Frank Vogel telling the press that Lance Stevenson steals Hibbert's rebounds. I'm like, really, coach?
Oh, and by the way, this is I'll actually plug a piece that is currently not even in draft mode. It's something I have in the back burner, but I was going to talk about how to rebuild in one season. Lance Stevenson is currently making $1 million a year, and his contract is up. If you are an astute NBA team, and don't forget the Mavericks, the Suns, and the 76ers all have tons of cap space this offseason. If Indiana's not careful, I would recommend all of those teams definitely shoot at him in restricted free agency, offer him $10 million a year, see if Indiana, this is the team that was claiming in the lockout they couldn't afford big players before signing, players like David West to $10 million a year. See if they blink, and see if you can pick up Lance Stevenson for $10 million a year.
I'd say 10 is not enough. Pay 12, pay 13.
Well, you can go for whatever you need.
Let's be honest. I'd pay 15 for him if what he's doing now is what he's going to do for the rest of his career. He's worth 15. The question is the market enough that you can get away with paying him 12?
I mean, I definitely think I'm curious, and that would definitely show Indiana's hand. I don't know if they would match it. I think Brian is giving us, we're coming close to the end of the segment. I don't know if we want to wrap anything up other than basically the Pacers are amazing. People don't seem to understand that if you're a 60-win team, you don't just have one good player. If you're a 60-win team, you don't even have two good players. You have at least three star players, and this has been true of every 60-win team in the history of the NBA. It is true.
Not true.
Oh, really? Who do we got?
The Cavaliers in LeBron's last season.
Oh, jeez.
They had two
All right,
great players.
They had
Barahau and they had LeBron. No one else in that team could be even considered remotely great. But the rules kind of go out the window, and one of the great players is LeBron.
I'll agree with that. LeBron James is this player that he I look at his numbers on a regular basis, and he just blows me away with what he can do. But yeah, I mean, it seems ridiculous the lack of love.
I think the Thunder this year are kind of like that too, although it's close. I mean, Ibaka's great, Durant is great, and then beyond that they have Cephalosha, who's really good. Collison is above average. They don't really have another great player on that team.
All right, so barring LeBron, barring LeBron and Kevin Durant in their best seasons, and maybe Magic. Actually, that would be true. Magic Johnson after Kareem had faded. So fine, like 3 players get this pass, and there
The
are
point
3
is,
of the.
it's definitely more than one.
Yeah,
More than one All-Star on that team. And this brings me to the last thing I said before we wrap the show. If you're going to have the special coach's unwritten rule that the best team gets 3 players, then it isn't fucking Chris Bosh. Nothing against the guy. He's playing well, but it's the Pacers. The Pacers are the team that deserves 3 players. If that's your rule, that one team deserves 3 players in the All-Star game, it should be the Pacers this year.
I agree.
How is that not clear to every coach who's had his team get a big-ass can of whoop-ass opened on them by the Pacers this year?
Well, I mean, it definitely brings the idea that maybe coaches don't know things as well as we think they do, especially some of the older ones. I don't actually have a clever segue on this to go into LaMarcus Aldridge other than the idea of a player getting more credit. This seems funny to me. I wrote a piece, and as I mentioned, it was basically a recycling of yours, Patrick, but that's only because Wes Matthews and Damian Lillard had kept it up, and your point to Robin Lopez being this just phenomenal value this season to where the Portland Trailblazers, and I mean, you can look at what they're good at, right? They're really good at not turning the ball over. They're really good at offensive rebounds. Their shooting is okay, but the only reason their shooting is okay is they have 2 historic seasons going on with Lillard and Matthews. And of course, the love is all going to LaMarcus Aldridge. And we spent a good portion of today going over shot charts, going over data, to just go, look at how ridiculous all of these batshit theories. We already cussed batshit and leave the explicit up on it. But yeah, there's these crazy theories about how LaMarcus Aldridge improves this team. And I'm okay letting you or Devin just go nuts because they were some good ones.
Well, how about I'll just start with the segue that you missed. I don't know how you missed this one. Aldridge he's appointed as an all-star reserve, right?
Yes, that is true. And
he made it instead of Anthony Davis. So there's the segue. But yeah, Aldridge made the team ahead of guys like Anthony Davis, and really
DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, that's the other one. And
by the way, he's only the best center in basketball this year. That's all.
No biggie. He's just the best center. Nothing big. But Aldridge is. It's the old, as you said in the article, it's the old Carmelo Anthony, Allen Iverson ploy of kind of stealing all the credit from the more efficient, more productive players on his team, like Nick Batum and Wesley Matthews. And way back at the beginning, near the beginning of the season, Patrick wrote a piece, I think, about Wesley Matthews, didn't you?
Well, yeah, that he was the undisputed most improved player at the time. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, see if he still is, I think. Ironically, when I wrote that, at the time I wrote that, I was like, well, Lance Stevenson is better than he was last year, but not by such a huge amount. I think if we went back and looked at the numbers now, that story would have changed. Because I think Wes Matthews cooled down a little bit from three-point range, but he's still having a spectacularly good season, much better than his last year. And as I said before, it's not all just shooting, right? He is shooting better, but he's also rebounding better. He's also got his turnovers down. I mean, he's having a really, really great season, but getting none of the credit for it.
What I'll say,
he would have been a better choice than Lillard, for example, as their other All-Star.
I apologize profusely. I tried to cut it in my dogs. My wife just got home and they decided to start barking really loudly right as I unmuted myself. One of the things that bugged me, I got into a discussion with one of the people who used to post at Wages of Wins, who is James Mercado, and it's basically this idea that Aldridge deserves the credit and the box score is there's not enough context in it. And what I'll kind of dispute that with is that if you want to convince me that LaMarcus Aldridge shooting 21 shots a game is improving his team, you have to show me some connection, right? You can't just, a lot of people are doing the definite causation problem, right? LaMarcus Aldridge is shooting 21 shots a game on a team that's winning. Ergo, it must be LaMarcus Aldridge's 21 points, which is also the same logic that, Adam Morrison wins you titles, Without Adam Morrison, the Lakers have won 0 titles. With him, they won 2. Clearly, Adam Morrison is why they win titles. But the issue to me is we looked at the shot charts. And so, for instance, LaMarcus Aldridge, a majority of his mid-range shots that he's good at, and by good at, it's like 49% at his best, are assisted. Devin pointed this out. He's getting assisted. And then, Patrick, you pointed this out. That means he's getting shoved out of the paint on offense. And if you think about this, that's not a good thing.
Actually, I'm going to disagree with you. That's not exactly what I was saying. So if you look at all of his mid-range shots, like about 2/3 of them, a little more maybe, are assisted. But if you look at a specific subsection of his mid-range shots, namely shots between like 6 and 16 feet, you'll find that the majority of those are not assisted. Those are LaMarcus Aldridge's equivalent of post-ups. Those are the ones where he gets like an entry feed into the post and makes some kind of a move, does something on his own to create a shot, and so there's no assist here. And this is what amazes me about LaMarcus Aldridge. He has somehow managed to turn a big shortcoming into a perceived strength. Because if you look at almost every other big guy in the league, and in fact this was true of LaMarcus Aldridge during his first couple of years, coaches will complain about how they're not getting physical enough, they're not forcing shots, they're not establishing position in the paint, they're not getting the ball low enough. And if you look at the way LaMarcus Aldridge posts up, and I see this consistently, I watch a lot of Blazers games because I live in Seattle, and the NBA has given me no other home team to watch. So, what you see very often is...
You could just enjoy that Seahawks win. I'm still bitter.
It was, I'm sure David Stern had something to do with that. But, I mean, if you look at the way he goes to establish position in the post and get that post entry pass, he doesn't even try to get low post position, right? He kind of just goes down there, and defenders kind of give him a little shove underneath the butt and kind of move him out of the zone, and he's more than content with that. And so he catches, the post-up entry passes in that area of like 6 to 16 feet. And then he usually makes some kind of a one dribble spin move, fadeaway jumper, and then it goes in about 40-ish% of the time, that might even be better than most people shoot from that range, but that still doesn't make it a good shot. And, first of all, it's totally unclear to me how a guy shooting from 20 feet creates space for the guy shooting from 24 feet. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I do get that
especially
it might
when
make
they're
space
assisted
for Robin Lopez to get offensive rebounds, but do we need a guy to do that? I mean,
yeah. I was going to kind of talk on that a little bit, as you were saying, because as he gets farther from the basket, that's where the percentage of his mid-range shots that are assisted increases. So he actually goes up. He ends up being around 78% kind of deep, really deep too, right before the three. 78% of his mid-range shots are assisted at that point. So he's not really creating a shot, right? He's just getting a pass from a teammate. And
nor is he creating the space, because what he's really doing is just receiving a pass from a point guard or a shooting guard or somebody penetrating and pitching, right? The person penetrating is obviously the one creating space because they're drawing help defenders, and then they're pitching out to the open man, which happens to be him. And sure, it's great that he can spot up there and be a target for somebody, but it's unclear to me how that's better than any one of their three-point shooters occupying the space that would be 5 or 6 feet behind him.
Exactly.
Being free for, I think other teams like Houston show this paradigm off pretty well. I mean, Houston plays basically one big and 4 shooters. And when you look at when the Warriors did so well in the playoffs, I think Ethan Sherwood-Strauss wrote about this on ESPN today. The best lineups that the Warriors had during the playoffs last year were Andrew Bogut and 4 shooters. You don't need a guy at 20 feet creating space.
Well, also, you don't need so one of the stories we still need to write about, you threw this out there, and basically I hadn't written about it yet, and I said I'll put this in a future piece, and we still need to address it, is LaMarcus Aldridge is having one of his best rebounding seasons ever, but it's all on the defensive end. And so this is problematic, just to kind of wrap up LaMarcus Aldridge and kind of the overrated. The Blazers have three-point shooters that can space the floor. I call it the pizza test, Patrick. You've talked about this. If a mid-range shot spaces the floor, then why the heck is going back 5 feet not spacing the floor as well, and they have players that can do this. So why is Aldridge being tasked with spacing the floor when they have three-point shooters? Second, LaMarcus Aldridge is really good at rebounding. So why the heck on offense are you taking him away from the hoop? If you look at Robin Lopez's shot chart and rebound chart, this is a guy that just gets it. He goes, I'm a 7-footer. My job is to be as close to the basket as possible. The other shot chart I compared this to was 2001 Shaq. Shaq realizes this. I can't shoot from outside. My job is to be here. So to kind of wrap that up with Aldridge, I don't buy that he's spacing because the stuff that he's good at, he's not doing. It really seems to me that on offense, he's just shooting a lot and taking the shots from people that could do the exact same thing he's doing better. And until someone, this is the challenge out there to Blazer fans, if you show me that when Aldridge is taking that mid-range shot, that a good percentage of the time he's opening up a three-point shot and he is making the pass to someone who makes the pass to that person, I might believe you. The only other good comment we saw, sorry, Brian, I'm taking us a little long on this, is that, yes, the three-point shot to two-point shot equivalency leaves out the fact that three-point shots with a lower efficiency will result in more rebounds. And that gives up possession more to the defense, which I'll give you, but it also leads to the fact LaMarcus Aldridge should not be away from the hoop with really good three-point shooters. On that, okay, Devin, I'm going to see if you can do this because I messed up the segue. Is there a good segue from LaMarcus Aldridge being overrated and all of this stuff that we've just scratched the surface of to Patrick's next topic?
You know what? I think I'm a little stumped on this one.
Thank you for that. Thank you for dropping the assist. Okay, so the next topic, Patrick, again, as I was talking about pre-show, you have some of the best insight to like the hidden stuff in the NBA. Even the Aldridge point, I kicked myself after. And you're like, the real story is his rebounding. I was like, damn it, you're right. But the piece is written. But you brought up Shawn Marion made this comment, and basically said, there's a problem in the NBA. These players need to stay in college more. You know, if you come into the NBA, they really need to know their ABCs or A's and B's or what he used letters. And you know, basically said if they can't come in ready, they don't deserve to get paid. They should stay in college. And you called BS. And the discussion back and forth you and I had is we're both tech people, and this to us is ludicrous.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In response to the piece, I think it was somebody wrote that he worked for a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and those companies make people get college degrees even when the job itself he doesn't think would require a college degree to perform. And I'm like, well, yeah, right there, you're saying it. So you're saying a job that doesn't have a high barrier entry, that doesn't require a specific high skill set, and it's a Fortune 500 company, so it's a place that a lot of people want to work. And there's this huge, enormous population of people that both A, want to work there, and B, are capable of working there. Of course, the company is putting up these barriers and saying, you know, oh no, we don't want to interview every fucking person on earth, so we're going to make you give a college degree first before you can apply to us. And the NBA is trying to do the same thing, obviously, because the NBA would not like to, pay everyone exactly what they're worth, because then they end up paying LeBron James $40 million a year. $30 million a year, etc. So that's why the NBA has formed a cartel. That's why the NBA has salary caps and things like that, because that way they can control the amount of money that they pay to their laborers. But the thing about the NBA is that even though everyone would love to play in it, not everyone is capable of it. In fact, very, 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 very few people are capable of it. And usually, in the free market at large, that's just not how it works. In the free market at large, usually when you're an employer and you've got a job that only a few people on the earth can do, and you really need that job done, you have to pay top dollar, and you can't really be picky about, whether or not you don't say, oh, you got to have a college degree or not. And Dre and I have seen this in the tech industry. Like, in the tech industry, there just aren't that many people that are really good at software programming. It actually should surprise a lot of people, and I say this as somebody who's done a lot of recruiting for big companies, like Amazon, Microsoft. I've interviewed lots of people, but you'd be surprised at the number of people that have college degrees in software programming that aren't very good at software programming. And so what companies like that end up doing is they end up giving out internships to people in college, hoping that this person's actually going to be really good at the job, and then, A, they get some work out of them during that internship, and B, when that person graduates from college, they might want to actually come work for you as a tech company. And in every experience I've had when I was working for really good companies that people want to work for, like Amazon, like Microsoft, like other tech companies in Seattle, these companies are paying interns to work for them. They don't get interns to work for free because the interns in computer science programs know that they are a type of skilled labor that's in demand. They know they don't have to work for free. So even companies like Amazon and Microsoft, companies that, like, seriously, if you poll most people in the U.S. and asked if they would like to work for a company like that, most people would say, hell yes. Even those companies are paying interns to do internships for them, right? So the idea that the NBA keeps getting free labor is kind of weird, right?
Well, and even on that point, Patrick, so first off, the guy who made the point about the Fortune 500 requirements, in software engineering, every job, this is Microsoft, this is Google, this is HP. I've worked at Google and HP. By the way, I apologize to the listeners. Patrick and I, these are definitely going to be first world problems when we bring this up. I felt a little bad about that, but figured it was worth it. But when I got my first internship at HP, which they paid me for, and it was such a ludicrous raise, I was working as a stock boy in a warehouse, and then I got hired at HP and basically was getting real money. Which was ridiculous to me. They lowered the bar. They had a 3.5 GPA standard. I didn't have it at the time. And they basically said, we can't find software developers, right? We want to hire software developers. We can't find them. We have this arbitrary bar. You know what? You're in. And so like that, the same thing in the NBA. The NBA does this too, right? There are tons of rookies that get contracts that are, not as high as they should be, but in the millions. And teams do this because they accept this player could be great, and we want to invest the money in them now because if we don't, we might lose them. So the NBA has very many of the same issues I see in tech. We're willing to train them. Like the Marion's point, they need to get trained is ridiculous. Teams are willing to train them because they go, if you have Anthony Davis, you can't tell me there isn't a team out there that wouldn't have willingly just spent the bank on Anthony Davis if he were a free agent. He would have gone. I think he could have gone for like $20 million if it was open market and some of the bigger teams could have got him. So that's ridiculous. The other point, and I think you knocked this too, is Shawn Marion, and I hate to be on the side of Kobe above Shawn Marion. Brian, I forget who made this comment, but it is in the comment section. Thank you very much. Made the point. Kobe Bryant says, look, I don't think going to college improves you. There are schemes that aren't used in the NBA. You said this in your article, Patrick. The three-point line is shorter. It is not the same game. You're stunting your growth because you're learning a different game that will no longer apply. As soon as you graduate college, none of those skills will ever be in demand again.
I thought the funniest part was how, where he said you learn your A's and B's, and he brought up the pick and roll. And I'm pretty sure, I don't watch a ton of college basketball. I'm a March Madness watcher, and then I used to watch it all the time when I was in college and stuff. But what little I do watch tells me that there's not a hell of a lot of pick and roll in college, and the teams that do run it don't run it very well because the bigs aren't very good at setting picks, the bigs aren't very good at rolling, and the ball handlers aren't nearly as big a threat outside. And lastly, because most colleges play a very big, healthy dose of zone, and not the kind of zone you see in the NBA with these 3-second rules and stuff, but the kind of zone where they pack the paint and they just freaking dare you to shoot outside. And you don't have the kinds of guys that off the dribble can stop and nail a three-pointer the way you do in the pros. Those guys are actually not very common. That's one of the reasons they actually make it to the pros and succeed there. And that's why in the pros, the pick and roll is really hard to defend because you have guys who are really good at coming off the pick and drilling a three-pointer. You have guys that are really good at splitting double teams. You have bigs who know how to turn off of the pick and roll to the hoop hard, or who, like Kevin Love, can slip and pop and get outside and be very dangerous. And you don't have those guys in the NCAA, and you don't have defenses against which that would work. Against most zone college defenses, you tried to run a pick and roll, you'd just be running your point guard dumb against switching zone defenders, and the big has nowhere to roll to the hoop because there's just three guys standing underneath the hoop. I mean, there's no pick and roll game in college. Where would you learn that? It's crazy.
And actually, this kind of touches back on LaMarcus Aldridge. Actually, I should have thought about it earlier. But in college, you've got that shorter three-point line, so players practice if you're smart, you're going to practice kind of right along the edge of it, but it's still a 3. When you move to the NBA, that becomes a long 2. So you've practiced this long 2 for years and years and years, taking all those 3s in college, and you move to the NBA, and they're one of the worst shots you could possibly take. So that's a perfect example of practicing something that is not useful in the NBA game.
And then finally, there's the point of playing against inferior talent, right? I mean, there's no way you can tell me that Anthony Davis would be a better player if he'd spent his sophomore year in college. That'd be great because he'd be dominating against inferior players, and that's not what's going to make him the better player.
Yeah, the great quote that you did was for DeMarcus Cousins. Again, I have to defend Kobe Bryant and DeMarcus Cousins against Shawn Marion. But DeMarcus Cousins said, at Kentucky, right? That's where he went. I don't follow enough, so apologies if I get it wrong. He was told, look, stay here if you want to pay the coach's salary by the coach. Go to the NBA if you want to pay your salary. And that's the point. Is the only reason the college myth persists for the NBA is because of the draft. Because the draft keeps incoming players artificially low. Teams are willing to put up with this. They're learning in college myth. If the draft disappeared tomorrow, rest assured NBA teams would be yelling at players never to go to college because they're like, don't you dare go to college and learn bad skills.
And if you want to talk about DeMarcus Cousins and staying in college versus declaring for the NBA, Dave Barry has done the research showing your performance, your team's performance in the Final Four will impact your draft position. And if you remember, several years ago, Joakim Noah was kind of the consensus, almost top pick of one of the drafts, and that's when Florida won. I think it was their second title, and he decided to stay in one more year. Florida did not make the Final Four the next year, and he dropped to somewhere around 10 or something like that. Ninth, yeah, there you go. And he still hasn't caught up.
Wasn't he picked right after they won the championship?
No, I think what you mean. I thought they went back to back with him and Horford, which is not hard to believe that a team could win with.
Right. But then because Brewer was drafted the same year and he came off of the championship year, right?
Well, maybe he did, but the point is his stock went down. That's my main point. So
yeah, no, I mean it's definitely clear that if your team makes there's very hard empirical evidence that if your team makes a big run in March Madness, your draft stock goes up and it disappears the next year. That's why I think the smartest guy in the NBA right now is definitely Marcus Teague, because I mean he would have not been drafted if he had not come up.
Yeah.
Well, and Melo did that too. Melo makes Syracuse wins it, and he just goes, "I'm done."
I think the smart decision is if you're ever in discussion for a top pick in any draft, you declare. Why would you stay in? There's no reason to.
Yeah, and so by the way, my battery may die soon, and we're right about at time anyway. So I loved all of these. Obviously, check out the site for Arturo's power rankings. They're number 9. A huge shout out. Thanks to Coach Nick. He did an MVP breakdown. He did include LaMarcus Aldridge, but he included points over par and wins produced and gave a great shot to the Boxscore Geeks site. Which thank you so much.
Nick's going to be on this podcast. That's what I want to know.
We actually, I need to talk to Brian about this. I need to start doing flyers out to guest people because there are a ton that I want to get on the show for sure. And Nick, we need on definitely, especially because
definitely want Coach Nick on.
And then in terms of upcoming pieces, there's one I've got. I don't know if I want to plug it so much because we may hold off a bit because it's an evergreen piece. Some of the stuff we want to touch on, definitely some great, not LeBron James, but some great names coming up in free agency that some teams should take a look at. We're going to look at Kevin Durant's January without Russell Westbrook. Are there other topics you two have on the queue for next week?
I don't have anything. Yeah, I don't have anything specific.
Out of ideas right now.
Well, that's a lie. One of Patrick's idea, I guess maybe I'll pick this up, is LaMarcus Aldridge's insane rebounding this season. We definitely have a few topics coming up for next week. Something that came up in the comments, Patrick you agreed to this. So if you have a mailbag, tweet at us or put it in the comments for this. We have tons of pieces that we get, so it's hard to get all the comments. In the comments for this show or at Twitter, you can do at Nerd Numbers. You're at Devin Dignam, right? At Devin Dignam, at Brian Foster. I'll put these in the notes, so don't worry about it. Or at NBA Geek, also at Arturo Galetti. Shoot them out if you want us to answer them on the podcast. We'd be happy to do a mailbag with a bunch. Thanks to all the people who commented. I think Brian got at least a couple of your tweets and stuff up there. So that's our show. And thanks. We'll see you next week.